Welcome to Diagnosing Dx, the podcast giving diagnostics the platform it deserves. While therapeutics and devices often take centre stage, diagnostics is the engine driving precision medicine. I'm your host, David Philby, and each week we spotlight the innovators, breakthroughs, and real-world challenges shaping the future of DX. In this episode of Diagnosing Dx, I sit down with Maria Zannes, CEO of bioAffinity, to break down why the current standard of care in lung cancer still leaves physicians guessing and patients at risk. We talk about the shift towards non-invasive diagnostics, the real challenge of driving adoption in healthcare, and how one test could change both outcomes and economics in lung cancer. If you're building, investing, or scaling in diagnostics, this is a conversation you need to hear. Welcome to the show this week, Maria. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And you?
I'm very good, thank you. Very good. On a Monday morning as well, fresh. So
That's right.
the best time to be recording a podcast. And where in the world are you?
I'm in San Antonio, Texas.
Starting to get hot?
Oh, absolutely. But we have, like the rest of the world, I think, unusual weather. Sometimes it's very, very hot, and the next day it's very, very cold. But we always have hot weather coming into the spring and summer.
Texas, actually, before we get, Texas seems to be quite high on the list of possible destinations for diagnostics companies, especially around looking to set up lab space in the last few periods. I feel like there's a lot of push away from the classic, California, and especially around, Silicon Valley and everything else, and where employment is expensive and so forth. But Texas seems to be coming up time and time again.
I think that's true for a number of reasons. One is that it's a business-friendly state, but it also has some just very, very good institutions, whether it's MD Anderson or UT Health, the University of Texas. Health science centers are very well known, and we have other great universities from which to get good people. So I see that too, and I think that the real estate market, it's a little bit less expensive, and of course Austin is a great hub, but so is San Antonio.
That's awesome. Good to hear.
Yeah.
So we've got quite a lot to get into, and I actually feel like bioAffinity press releases and updates and milestones, it seems to be coming quite thick and fast at the moment. So we've got a lot to talk about. But before we do that, why don't you take us through your background and career and introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. So I actually started in journalism, which was a good foundation for me. It taught objectivity and really looking at the world as objectively as you can. And of course, that translated very well as I got into business and into what we're doing now, which is innovation and discoveries. But I spent some time on Capitol Hill as a congressional aide, and then got into business. I'm little more than 30 years ago, and was largely in the energy and environmental business for some time. Ran a couple of companies in that area for Burlington Northern and Burlington Environmental. Then I moved back to New Mexico, which was my home, because my oldest brother was ill. He had been battling cancer for 30-some years, but he unfortunately had a diagnosis of glioblastoma, brain cancer. So I was blessed to be back there to take care of him during that time. And at that time, came across some very, very interesting technology that had come out of Los Alamos National Labs up in Los Alamos in New Mexico. And that was technology that was using a specific molecule called a porphyrin that labeled cancer and cancer-related cells. And I was asked to help because somewhat of my political and business background in raising some funds for them, we were able to raise funds for the state of New Mexico and ran a clinical trial, which turned out to be, we published it as the Patriquin trial, that showed that the company had a very unique and very promising biomarker for cancer, and particularly lung cancer. And through a series of events, I ended up running the company and took it to San Antonio, where I started working with one of the very, very good people I was talking about, scientists here in San Antonio. Her name is Vivian Ravel. Vivian recently retired, but she and I started to work and build bioAffinity into what it is today.
Wow. So was bioAffinity your first, even for when it was, I guess before it was bioAffinity and you were talking about this biomarker, was this your first exposure to the diagnostic world?
It was in the sense of being in business, but it certainly was not in the sense of life and personal life, because my family often had battled with cancer, cancer-related diseases. So being on that other side, that patient and caregiver side, really brought, I think, a very interesting perspective. But I had been in business for and had worked in with the financial and raising money, as well as in the political arena in lobbying for quite some time before. So it was not new to me. I think what had many parts of it was not new to me. One of the things that I realized, and this goes back to that objectivity, you know what you know and you know what you don't know, is that it pushed me to find Dr. Rebel. It pushed me to find a really top-notch scientific team who could look objectively at this technology and say whether it was worth pursuing. And indeed, it was.
I love that. I mean, we talk about it often about how a startup CEO's best attribute is humility and the ability to know their limitations and build a team around them that plug the gaps, right? And,
Yeah,
we
I think
actually
that's very true.
we interviewed a CEO fairly recently who's probably a year in as a CEO of a diagnostics company, and before that was, different industry completely. And again, spoke of the benefits of sort of having this feeling of, instead of knowing the trodden path of what can and can't be done, just always having this sort of optimism for, well, let's go find out what can be done and assess all our options and pick the right way, instead of just this almost negative assumption of, oh, can't do that, we can't do that, that will never work and stuff. And sort of bringing I mean, how do you find your past in business and journalism playing into it?
So I think what you said is right, but I'd put another little spin on it. I'd say that you can learn as much and be as happy with your failures as with your successes. Particularly in biotech, you have to know what doesn't work to know what works, and you have to know why it works as well. So some of our most interesting discoveries were in understanding the mechanism of action of something that worked, in particular that porphyrin, that molecule that I talked about. So there is, I think objectivity is extremely important. I think that our team is one very much based on science, where there has to be a bit of humility, because you are dealing with Mother Nature, who doesn't. I have a very good patent attorney who says she does not give up her secrets willingly. So you have to be able to, you have to have that humility and have to be able to pursue. But it's absolutely, yeah, I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's absolutely the best job in the world when you start to see that what you've built makes a difference. And the VA can be a very large market for us. And I always kid that I like to do business with people who print their own money. So the government can be a very, very important part of our path forward.
Yeah, awesome. And so who are bioaffinity? If you can give us a sort of objective view of what you guys are and what you're trying to do.
Sure. So what we developed is a platform technology for the diagnosis of lung disease, and we pretty much tackled the most difficult first, which is lung cancer. We have a test that I'll explain in a minute that is non-invasive and is used by individuals who have what is called indeterminate nodules. They have small pulmonary nodules where the physician is not sure of next steps or wants to be more assured of the next steps he or she is going to take. Um, it's a it's a platform I say, because not only have we been successful, had very good performance, and if you go on our site, you can see a dozen different case studies where we've found lung cancer as early as stage 1A, where it's curable. And in fact, in those individuals, the physicians consider it cured. But it is a test that patients can collect their sample at home. They send it to the lab, and then in 3 days, a physician gets a definitive answer of whether there's likely malignancy in the lung or unlikely malignancy. We've built now that platform to go into COPD and asthma tests, diagnostic tests, sort of a scorecard for inflammation that can not only detect COPD and asthma. I think our first test in that realm will be in asthma, but also looks to determine whether one of the many very successful biologics and treatments for asthma work versus another one. And it is, I think, a larger market than the lung cancer market, but the lung cancer diagnostic market also is huge.
Yeah. We hear some scary stats on lung cancer and how late it's being detected, right? So is I mean, you've got the big poster in the background, but early detection is the goal, and why is that?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's getting better. I think that so I just want to preface what I've seen in the field, and when I speak to physicians, and what I'm seeing is that we're finding lung cancer earlier and earlier. Let me give you an idea. Right now, the overall survival rate for lung cancer is about 30% over 5 years. So 30% of the people will live for 5 years. The statistics. But if you find cancer early, if you find it in stage 1 and you treat it, even 20 years ago, you had 92%, 93%, 10-year survival rate. And I think that is even greater. We'll talk a little bit about a larger clinical trial that we're embarking on. We were starting to enroll, but I was in Florida last week with a physician at the VA in Miami, and they have a very active and aggressive program to get screened early. And he said 70% now of his capture of his diagnosis of lung cancer is at early stage. So I think we're seeing a paradigm shift in how lung cancer is diagnosed and how it's treated. Very, very exciting technology treatments, therapies are out there. And we're just very, very happy to be part of this solution.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
is education and awareness a big part of the journey in terms of getting patients to understand what's available, physicians to know these tools are out there, and getting people to go and get tested so that we can bring it in earlier now that the science is improving?
Yes, I think that's very true. There is a sense of often, oh, I did this to myself. I smoked, and there's a sense of nihilism. Oh, it won't matter. But indeed, both are just not true. People who smoke, it is an addiction, and but it is not their fault. And um, certainly that people have lived and will continue to live long, good lives, even having a diagnosis of lung cancer. So finding it early can make this very, very large difference in outcomes. So it is education. It's getting that word out. That becomes very important. I think for us, we have had very, very good reception to what we're doing. One of the advantages we have is this is a non-invasive test. It is called CyPath Lung. And it's a non-invasive test where people take home a small box or it's shipped to them. And then over 3 days, they collect their sputum, the phlegm that comes from the lung. They have an assist device, a little handheld assist device to get the phlegm up. And they cough into a cup for 3 days and then they send it back to our lab. So I think that can help. I know that helps people to feel more comfortable in their own home. For the physician, we take over. We have a patient coach who helps patients to do this. And then the physician gets a definitive result that he or she can really use. It's actionable for them to get that early diagnosis of lung cancer.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And so, are you guys operating through physician offices solely, or are you also developing direct to consumer models, or do they already exist and trying to raise awareness that way?
We're raising awareness with direct to consumer, but not necessarily. They cannot order a a patient needs a physician in order to order the test. And that's because it is a tool for diagnosis. And we have a reimbursement code that is, and reimbursement through both Medicare and through private payers as a diagnostic. But we are aiding when there's we want to promote, I should say, low dose CT screening. We want to promote lung cancer screening because it's a very, very valuable tool in understanding whether or not you have cancer. It's very sensitive. The difficulty with low dose CT is that it calls or can call a number of things that look suspicious cancer when it's not cancer. So what our test does is twofold. It has very high specificity, and that means the ability to say that a true negative, that when you don't have cancer, we say it correctly, you don't have cancer. It has 87% specificity, but it also has very high sensitivity. It's able to find and call when somebody has cancer. It has 92% sensitivity, and those are combined. So it's a very balanced test. So it's one where physicians first would see a nodule of concern, and then use our test, and then we decide on what's next steps. I want to add that whereas low dose CT is the screening method for people who are at high risk for lung cancer. So those are people who are 50 to 80 years old and have smoked 20 pack years, the equivalent of 1 pack a day for 20 years. We're seeing an equal number, in some places growing number, of incidental nodules. So there's more and more screening done when you have something wrong with your heart or your cardiovascular system, and an indeterminate, a suspicious nodule comes up. And so physicians are getting those nodules and using our test as well. And then the test also can be used for people who have had cancer and they are under surveillance. And that's because our test is not a molecular marker. It's not looking at a mutation of DNA. It's actually looking at the lung microenvironment. It looks at the different cell populations in your lung and sees that there are certain populations that are upregulated, that increase when a malignancy is present. And because of that, we're a test that if you've had a prior cancer, you can still use our test.
Maria, you mentioned that you had previously had family members that had been diagnosed with cancer, and you also mentioned that this is the best. I don't know if you said this is the best job in the world or the best industry in the world, but do you get a greater sense of fulfillment out of what you're doing by bringing this kind of test to market and this science to market, because it's so profound in terms of the ability to change the course of someone, the 30% survival rate in 5 years versus 92% 10 years if found at stage one is massive, isn't it? But is that why you're doing this, and do you get that sort of sense of purpose out of it because of what you're doing?
That's certainly true, but I have to also say that I work with just some amazing people here, who are so very, very dedicated. Bringing something to market and being in a small, cap company is not easy, but it is so enjoyable, given the dedication and the people that we have. I'll give you an example. So our chief medical officer, Dr. Gordon Downey, joined us after Dr. Rebel, retired, and Dr. Downey was practicing interventional pulmonology as a pulmonologist for 32 years. We initially we initially met him because the sales team and I, a couple of the sales team and myself, were at a dinner, and Dr. Downey was talking about a competitor's test that he was using, and so we went up to Gordon and we said, "Would you take a look at our test? We're just bringing it to market." He's an MD, PhD. He had done some research in porphyrins, which is part of our test. He said, "Yeah, I'm very much interested." And he started to use the test. And after doing about 200 tests with people, some of his case studies are up and finding stage 1A with with our test, where other tests said no, there wasn't cancer. Anyway, he became now our chief medical officer. And he retired and then came to work for us. So it's we have a group of people who say, "Show me that it works. I want to see this." This isn't a group a kid that suffers from founderitis. We want to make sure that what we're bringing to market makes a difference. And I think that is key for me, is the people that surround me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's talk about what the story up until now. How long have you guys, um, how long did you develop the product before you built your lab, and the milestones you've achieved along the way, team growth, etc., the significant milestones along the way?
We started with a small group, and Dr. Rebel and her team were actually at UT. So then she came to work with us, and she built our science team, and we continue to see it grow. It was a couple of years ago when we started to market CyPath Lung. And in between that time that Dr. Rebel and I started working together and the commercialization of the test, you can imagine we had a lot of work that we did in developing it. This is a test that is a flow cytometry test, a flow cytometric test. And we then added AI, we added machine learning to the end, or to analyze the result of the data collection for flow cytometry. And we took the test once it was developed through a couple clinical trials, and then one clinical trial that the Lemieux trial was one in which we had such great performance. And it was after that we then validated it as a laboratory developed test under the CMS, Center for Medicaid and Medicare rules and authority. And so now we then and now we have our own lab with precision pathology. So we have full control of it. So it's been a journey. We started the company in 2014. So a little less than 12 years. But we're very excited, and we just have an absolutely great test and even greater future.
That's great. And you mentioned there's an upcoming clinical trial that we should touch on, and what's the focus of this and the size and so forth?
So I had mentioned that we were working with the military, and and actually San Antonio is known as Military City, USA. So we've done several research projects with Brooke Army Medical Center, which is and a physician there, a pulmonologist there, has been our principal investigator. And along with Dr. Mike Morris, we have worked with the Murtha Cancer Center, which is the military's cancer center in Washington, D.C., to develop, and then now we're starting to enroll in a 2,000 patient trial, a larger patient trial, with the idea of bringing this test as standard of care within the military and the VA. So we have 17 sites that are being enrolled that have been qualified, and that's where I've been in opening these sites. And 14 of them are VAs. 2 is Brooke Army Medical, and Walter Reed is the other one. We have some funding from Murtha Cancer Center in moving forward with that. This will be a trial in which individuals who have nodules, lung nodules size between 6 millimeters and less than 30 millimeters, less than 3 centimeters, will have our test and will correlate whether or not and how well we're able to detect those lung cancers. What I understand when I talk to physicians, and I've had 3 physicians now say this is the holy grail for them because it can allow them to non-invasively find early stage lung cancer, or just as important, to tell people they don't have lung cancer, they don't have to go through an invasive procedure. The next steps without CyPath Lung most often are an invasive procedure, or at least a PET scan, which is can be significant radiation. And so having something that can save a patient from those invasive, risky, and certainly very costly procedures. I want to mention one other thing. Dr. Morris and another pulmonologist, Dr. Sheila Habib, at the VA here in San Antonio, did a study, a journal article, that looked at the economic impact of using CyPath Lung. And what they did was they looked at the information, the data from 2022, and they modeled out what would have happened had those people who had those small nodules use CyPath Lung. And what they found was there would have been a savings of more than $2,400 per patient for those who had Medicare, and more than $7,000 for those patients who had private insurance had CyPath Lung been used. So you can imagine the significant cost savings CyPath Lung can bring, particularly now that we have much more expensive follow-up care with navigational bronchoscopies and things like that.
Wow. So is that the that clinical trial feels that's a huge step in bioaffinity's life cycle, right? How long will that trial take? When will it be, completed? When will the data be public?
I think that we're looking at least 3 years, because we need to follow patients up to 2 years after that they have a nodule. But it could be less, and it also could take another year after that. So between 3 to 4 years is what we're estimating. But we have some very, very good sites with quite a lot of patients, so we're enthusiastic.
Yeah, because a trial that size, when we talk about awareness and we've talked on this show previously about, even when you have great tests with great science, at some point you've got to get a physician to change their workflows and accept a new way of doing things. So these kind of trials, or that size and scale, and the ability to bring that data to market, you're really going to start changing. Well, not start, but you're going to change more and more workflows and access to the test. That could be absolutely massive for patients and even people who need to be getting checked and are probably unaware that they have early stage cancer as we speak. Something like that feels like a huge move that could really turn the dial for everyone end to end.
Think that's very true, but I've got to tell you that it's commercial now, and whereas we started in Texas, it's our own backyard, with the beta marketing program where we learned a lot for about a year, a little over a year. We are now moving out into primarily now into the East Coast, and we're seeing a, a very good adoption of the test. So it won't doing the trial doesn't stop us from moving
Yeah,
forward with our commercial product, which I really see growth and expansion in it. Um, it, but I don't want to. And the trial will be very, very important to us, and I think we're very excited about
yeah. That is really
it.
exciting. We speak to a lot of early stage diagnostics companies that inevitably have set up their LDT and got their clear approvals and they're commercializing and so forth, but they are so far away from thinking about running a trial of that size. It feels so far in the distance. So it's awesome to see that a company at your stage with a commercialized product is taking those leaps to go and get the size of that data to really bring these products into the wider adoption, which is awesome. Um, Give us a bit of an insight, Maria. You've mentioned the team a few times and how you've been great at assembling great people and making sure that the people around you had and you said that lead with science and so forth. But how's the company set up to succeed, whether it's commercially, operationally, and anything else that you feel is one of the strengths of bioaffinity?
the Our laboratory is an anatomical laboratory. And flow cytometry. I think having that lab under our control, under full control, makes a huge difference because you have control from the beginning to the end. And we have an excellent COO, uh, uh, Xavier Revelis, who has done this for quite some time and really has done a great job in organizing. We purchased the lab that had helped us to get the LDT, but it was an independent lab and been operating for 18 years, and has a very strong pathology department. But I think, have made it even better and more focused, and certainly much more focused on CyPath Lung and what will be our asthma, COPD, our tests for lung inflammation. So I think that knowing and having everything that you need under one roof, so to speak, can be, I think, very, very important. The other thing is that we have not lost that very crucial mission of discovery and innovation. We have, I think, moved more with the commercialization of CyPath Lung to a quicker to market, because we just know more than we did when we were starting to develop CyPath Lung. Now, as we get into the inflammation, into the lung disease area with our platform, I think that we can move to market much quicker. So we have a group that I think is more geared towards commercialization than we had at the beginning, where we were doing more research and innovation and discovery. So those are two very important aspects of what we're doing. And we started the whole conversation about Texas, and it's a very friendly and very supportive state for us. And the universities have been absolutely great here. We've gotten quite a number of interns who have turned out to be just fabulous lab techs and scientists for us as well. So we're in a good spot and we're in a good place.
That's great. It's great that you put that emphasis on still being a discovery focused company, because there is that inevitable point in the journey where commercialization takes over and an organization can become so commercially focused, that sort of commercial engine where discovery becomes a thing of the past and the complete makeup of the company then shifts, and it's a very difficult transition. It's great to hear that discovery is still a major
It's
part of your plans.
it's very much a part. In fact, I was just talking this morning, our chief science officer, Bill Bauda. Dr. Bauda comes out of Ilex and Genzyme, worked for J&J, but is very, very much innovation oriented. In fact, those were the departments that he headed up for them. And that requires to listen to the science, to do the experiments. One of the things I think we all share is uh, is how can I say this? Is that we don't believe the first time it works. We want to we want to make sure that it works over and over and over again, and that's just good science, right? I remember Dr. Rebel Vivian would say, "An N of one is an N of nothing." You can't just having it work one time doesn't work, and so that innovation has made a huge difference. Can I tell you a little bit about a therapeutic discovery, which goes to that point of so I was saying that you have to also know that it works, but also with science, you want to know why it works. And we were looking at the porphyrin that I discussed, and it marks cancer and cancer-related cells. So, it with flow cytometry, you're looking at a fluorescence, and what happens with our porphyrin is that it glows this beautiful red color, and so it's very much distinguishable from cells that are not cancer or cancer related. So we were trying to figure out why this, or how this cancer, I should say, how this porphyrin got into cancer cells. And in doing so, we started knocking down, and I say we, it was not me, but it was our scientists, knocking down cell receptors on the membrane. Now, bear with me on this. They knocked down two receptors to see if they were responsible for taking up this porphyrin into the cell. And what they found was it killed cancer cells. If they just knocking down these receptors, the cancer cells would die. So Dr. Rebel said, let's try it on normal cells and see. And indeed, what happened was the normal cells flourished.
Mm.
So what we found in vitro, meaning in the test tube, is a mechanism by which we can knock down cancer. We can kill cancer. Your healthy cells are unharmed by it. And we have done research in glioblastoma, the cancer that my brother died of, in lung cancer, in breast cancer, in prostate cancer, and in skin cancers, and found the same effect. So what we're doing on a smaller scale is continuing to work with this therapeutic discovery in skin cancer to see if we can get something that would interest others.
That's super interesting. And would that be something that you would look to develop as yourself as a company, or potentially partner with a therapeutic organization that could help you bring that through?
I I think we would look at a therapeutic partnership.
Yeah, because it's a long road, isn't it? The
It,
therapeutic approval process,
it
especially
is.
compared to an LDT.
It is, and that's why I focus on our diagnostic, because that's so very important to us.
Yeah.
But as a story of what innovation and what discovery can bring you, it's an
Yeah.
interesting one.
Yeah, amazing. Um, Couple of final questions, Maria. A publicly traded company, bioAffinity. Why did it make sense for you guys to go that direction when you made that choice?
I think we had seen a better mechanism to raise funds, and that we needed funds, and
Hmm.
that was really the key driver for
Yeah.
going public.
And how's life as a publicly traded CEO? Is that something you've always dreamt of?
Well, I've certainly worked for a lot of publicly traded companies, so it was not a surprise.
Right.
And I do have my law degree. I am a lawyer, so the everything that has to be done also is not a surprise, and only understandable. But it's challenging, as it always can be. But so is life.
Yeah. Fair play. Um, I think it's admirable to be
Thank you.
to put yourself out there and ultimately, every word you say is somebody is listening, right? And making decisions based on that. It's
Well,
really interesting.
that's good. I have to talk to my sons then and see if they'll, uh,
I've got two
I'm
very
gonna
young daughters, and I'm so
I'm
used to
gonna tell
repeating
them
myself.
that.
Yeah, I'm knee deep in that at the moment, to be honest. I've got a
Oh,
4-year-old
good for
who
you.
I have to say things 10 times before she acknowledges it.
No,
Uh,
I have absolutely fabulous sons, so
yeah,
I'm not complaining.
yeah. And so future plans and milestones that we should be looking out for from bioaffinity. What's on the horizon?
So I do think that we'll move forward in sales and marketing. We're doing a more aggressive marketing now. Going forward, we'll have series of webinars and podcasts and work. What is interesting and what has been most effective for us for CyPath Lung is that peer-to-peer, is that doctor to doctor. And we have many doctors who want to speak on our behalf. Dr. Nicholson, a pulmonologist in New Jersey, recently did a podcast on something called ViewMedi, which is totally independent. He did it independently, explaining how he uses CyPath Lung. So I think that will be very important to us in doing those series of peer-to-peer and discussion there. The clinical trial, of course, is going to be very important, and as we continue to open sites, we'll be looking to do that. But really, it will be sales, and then, of course, I'm very excited about the work that we're doing in lung inflammation, in COPD, and in asthma. I just think that is a very, very large market and one where we can excel.
Is the asthma and inflammation side something that will go through the LDT route and be available in the near future?
Yes, I believe it will. Near is not next year, but maybe the year after.
Yeah, great.
Um, and it's work. And I think that we continue, as we look for operating funds and so forth, we continue not only to look at the market, but also to look at others, strategics and others who are maybe interested in our work. So we're trying and I think succeeding and doing the very best we can and raising funds judiciously.
Fantastic. Maria, this was awesome, so insightful, and another
Thank you.
another diagnostics company with a profound purpose and impact that they can have on workflows, physicians, and patients' lives. And I think it's awesome what you guys are doing. I genuinely wish you all the best with the clinical
Thank you.
trial, the inflammation side, and just the commercial success along the way. But thank you for coming on and just giving some insight today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Maria.